Okay. We are going to finish the endocrine system. So we only have four disorders to talk about today, but the last one is diabetes. And obviously, we're going to talk about the diabetes for a real long time. The first two that we're going to talk about are disorders of the adrenal cortex. So remember that the adrenal gland is like a little top hat for your kidneys. It's this little triangle that sits on top, one sits on top of each kidney. And if you remember, the cortex was the C on the outside that wrapped around the medulla on the inside. So the adrenal cortex, the first disorder, is Addison's. So the cortex made those corticosteroids. The corticosteroids were the doctor type of steroids, the steroids that we give you to decrease inflammation when you're broken out to something, or when something's super, super bad swollen, or when you have an autoimmune disease. And so adrenal cortex Addison's disease is where you have too little, so it is a hyposecretion of those corticosteroids. Again, you can call them corticoids, but it really helps me to call them corticosteroids because then I remember that they're the steroids. So your body normally makes those. When you just need an extra kick of them is when we prescribe you like a steroid pack. But this is where your body's not making as much as it's supposed to, usually autoimmune. Symptoms are, and this is the one that you should know because this is always the one that's on the, like when I say gout, you think big toe. When I say lupus, you think butterfly rash. When I say Addison's, you should think a bronzed skin or tan skin. Basically, if you want to know why, otherwise tune me out for the next 10 seconds. ACTH, that adrenocorticotropic hormone that the pituitary gland released, when it's releasing a ton of it, but your adrenal gland isn't responding, it releases more and more and more and more and more, going, hey, why aren't you working? Why aren't you working? Why aren't you working? And the adrenal cortex is sick. It has Addison's disease. It can't do anything. But that ACTH also affects your melanin. And remember, melanin is what gives you that the color of your skin. So it starts tanning you up. So anyone know who this is? JFK, always the correct answer on a history question. JFK was, everyone always thought he was so dreamy. You know what? People didn't used to be as cute as they are now, so don't judge them. But it was because he was this bronzed god. He always had this tan. And it was not that he laid out, it was that he had Addison's disease. Decreased blood pressure, decreased blood sugar, decreased weight. So what I want you to think is, yeah, they look tan, and then everything else is low. So steroids raise your blood pressure and raise your blood sugar and cause you to gain weight. So when you have decreased amounts of them, it decreases your blood pressure, decreases your blood sugar, and decreases your weight. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. I can be tan, skinny, and have low blood pressure. Okay, but it's like, you could pass out when you stand up, and you could pass out from low blood. So it's like real low. But I know what you're saying. Tan skin and weight loss, maybe it's worth it. Oh, but then it seriously imbalances your electrolytes to the point where it can stop your heart. Okay, you know what? Never mind. I will again just eat reasonably and go to the gym. So when you're taking the NCLEX exam, which is the licensure exam for nursing, they always have like a picture with each disease to help you picture something and remember it. So this is always a little lady for Addison's. So she's tan and she's all like tired. She's all slumped over and tired. It causes like weakness, and she's super skinny and real low blood pressure. It can also cause you to grow a mustache in the ladies. But again, the electrolyte problems, the sodium and potassium problems, are the real bad problem that can stop your heart. In order to treat this, you just have to stay on steroids, just like someone who has an autoimmune disease, and so we give you steroids forever, probably. Addison's is treated with steroids. So next comes the opposite of Addison's is Cushing's. So Addison's was adrenal cortex hyposecretion. Cushing's is adrenal cortex hypersecretion. So oversecretion of the corticosteroids from the adrenal cortex. So this is the same thing that happens usually from a tumor, but this is what happens when either your body can do it naturally, or if you're taking steroids, like a prescription steroid for whatever problem, and you take too many of them, it also causes Cushing's. So either your body can do it naturally, or we can prescribe you too many steroids and this happens. Symptoms are the exact opposite of Addison's with the exception of the tan skin. So weight gain, but it's a weird kind of weight gain. I always think, it's not nice, guys, but I always think Cushing's makes you really cushy because there's a lot of fat. It is especially in the midsection. So you have these skinny arms and skinny legs, but you get this gut, kind of like a beer belly. In the face, it was just called a moon face, and this lump of fat between your shoulder blades, that's called a buffalo hump. So I'll show you pictures of these. This is the NCLEX picture. Obviously, we do not want Cushing's. So you see real skinny legs, real skinny arms, but huge belly, round face, and this is the buffalo hump. So a couple more pictures. This is when the girl was taking too many steroids for autoimmune disease. This is the moon face. I always think of it like chipmunk face. And then this is her once she got the Cushing's under control. That is the buffalo hump. Don't confuse this with kyphosis. Remember, kyphosis was like Quasimodo the hunchback. This person, if we did an x-ray, would have a normal spine. There's a little curve in the thoracic lumbar, but it wouldn't be an over curve. This is just straight up adipose tissue, just pure fat. So remember, in Addison's, everything was low. Well, in Cushing's, where you have too much of it, everything's high. So high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high weight. It also is a steroid. It calms down your immune system, and so your cuts heal very slowly. And you can also you catch things very easily because your immune system is super calmed down. It can also cause excessive hair growth and not in the places you want it. Generally, we're going to either cut off the tumor or we're going to cut down on the prescription level, stop taking the corticosteroids. I will say that you can't just straight up quit taking corticosteroids or else you end up in the Addisons. So you have to taper off of these. And if you've ever had corticosteroid prescription, like you'll take 3 for a few days, and then you take 2 for a couple of days, and you take 1, and then you take a half of 1. They have to step you down off of them so that you don't get the opposite problem that Addison's. Okay, so this isn't really like a disease, but we're going to talk about, remember, the cortex of the adrenal gland made corticosteroids, which were the weightlifter steroids, and then I said the medulla made anabolic steroids, which are the weightlifter steroids. Did I say that backwards? Corticosteroids from the cortex are the doctor steroids. Anabolic steroids from the medulla of the adrenal are the weightlifter back alley steroids. So there you go. Anabolic steroids, also sometimes called androgens. Remember, this was really, really similar to testosterone, but it's not testosterone. So if you take weightlifter steroids, the risks are it can ruin your liver, can cause cirrhosis and liver damage. It can ruin your heart, can cause all sorts of heart problems and heart failure and heart attack. It also causes, the nice way of saying it is testicular changes. So basically, it will shrink men's testicles. Your testes, or a man's testes, if you don't happen to have them, they make testosterone, and androgens are so similar to testosterone that if you're injecting them, your testicles basically think, oh, okay, so I don't need to do this anymore, and so they shrink and stop making as much testosterone. It also causes men to grow breast tissue. The word for this, the medical word for this, is one of my favorites, called gynecomastia. If you've ever seen Fight Club, I'm not suggesting you see it because it's a super adult movie that you shouldn't see until you're 18. But there was a character called Bob who had like C cups, and that's gynecomastia. So I always think it turns men into women. It shrinks their testicles and makes them grow breasts, and it causes women to turn into men. So women, it causes them to grow beards and mustaches and deepens their voice. It also causes, you've probably heard of something called roid rage, steroid aggression. It causes, these people, dear God, they need a hug. They get so mean, so mean. Don't do steroids. It's not worth it. Okay, and so the very last one that we'll talk about, but we're going to spend a couple slides on it, is the diabetes. Just so you know, it is absolutely pronounced diabetes. But there was a commercial several years ago where a guy said something about he had the diabetes, and now I can't unhear it. So diabetes is a problem with the pancreas. And remember that the pancreas made insulin, and so that's what this is an issue with. Issue with insulin. In case you don't remember, insulin was the hormone that takes sugar out of your blood and lets it go into the tissue that needs to burn it. So you can think this is your calf muscle and you're running, and so your calf needs sugar to contract and to run. So you've got all this blood sugar floating around. It will just be trapped in the blood vessel and no good to you and can't be used unless you have a little insulin helper. Take it and pluck it out of the blood and put it in the tissue. Your heart uses it all your tissues need sugar to run. It's their fuel, it's their gas. And without insulin, it can't get to where it's needed. It's just stuck. It's stuck in the fuel pump. It can't get to your car. So symptoms are polyuria, which means you pee a lot. Remember, the kidneys try to get rid of sugar any way they can because you've got too much of it in your blood, and then water follows the sugar, so you end up peeing a lot, which polyphagia, excessive hunger, because your tissue thinks you're starving. Even though you've got all this sugar in your blood, your tissue's like, hey man, we're out of gas, we need to eat. And so you end up being super, super hungry. And polydipsia, excessive thirst. Because you're peeing so much, you get super thirsty. Unexplained weight loss in these people, which is interesting because, as you probably know, a lot of times overweight people have it. But they will lose a little bit of weight when they first get it. And then if it gets real bad, it can affect your vision and cause blurred vision. Remember, diabetic retinopathy, one of the most common causes of going blind in America is diabetes. There's so much sugar in your bloodstream, it ruins your vision. Here's what confuses a lot of people. Everyone thinks of diabetes and they think of the people like having low blood sugar because of diabetes. You only have low blood sugar and diabetes when you take too much medicine. If you have diabetes and it's not treated, the symptom is hyperglycemia, increased excessive glucose in the blood, high blood sugar. So your normal fasting, meaning you haven't eaten in several hours, blood sugar should be 70 to 110. I've taken blood sugars of diabetics and they were in the 500 range, which is right next to coma. So they keep eating and all this sugar is in their blood, and the only way they're getting rid of it is to pee some of it out. None of it's actually getting burned off as fuel. So diabetics who aren't treating their diabetes, they aren't taking medicine, they aren't taking insulin, they have hyperglycemia. So there's two different types of diabetes, super complicated names, type 1 and type 2. I gotcha. So type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So that's what we're going to talk about. Type 1, we used to call this juvenile diabetes, or like child diabetes. This is where something's wrong with the pancreas. So the pancreas produces very little or a lot of times no insulin whatsoever. This is an autoimmune thing. They've done nothing to cause this. Their pancreas just doesn't work like it's supposed to. It usually starts in kids. It can happen at any age, but it usually starts in childhood. Again, we used to call this juvenile diabetes because only kids had this. Kids didn't have type 2, they had type 1. However, we're going to learn in a second, type 2 is the one that you have when you're overweight. And now, because of all the honey boo-boos in America, we have children who are so severely overweight that they have type 2. So we can't really call it juvenile diabetes anymore, but that's what we used to call it back in the good old days when kids could only have this. We used to also call it insulin dependent because the only way to treat this poor, sad little pancreas is to just inject insulin. There's no pill that helps them. They have to inject their insulin. And it used to be different than type 2 because in type 2 you took a pill. However, sometimes now, with the way that America is, type 2 is so bad that they have to take insulin as well. So we can't call it juvenile because now kids have the other one, and we can't call it insulin dependent because now type 2 sometimes has to take insulin as well. So we just call it type 1. Treatment, shots. You have to take insulin, and then they have to watch their carbs because remember, carbs break down into sugar, and so that's what will skyrocket their blood sugar. So they can't, go pound a cake or their blood sugar is going to go through the roof. Okay, then there's type 2. Oh my God, how sad, guys. There's type 2. So type 2 is not that it's not 100%. So first of all, it's idiopathic. So who knows? But it's not that your insulin, it's not that your pancreas is the problem, it's that your cells aren't accepting the insulin. So usually something about adipose tissue, something about too much fat in your body makes your body resistant to insulin. It won't use the insulin. Now, sometimes it is that too little insulin is being produced, similar to type 1, but usually the bigger problem is that your cells aren't allowing the insulin to be used. Again, this is idiopathic, but generally weight and genetics play a huge role. This is almost exclusively in overweight people. And the genetics part, again, we don't know if it's that it runs in your family or that no one runs in your family. It is highly, highly correlated to weight. Here, so 9 out of 10 people with diabetes have type 2. Very rare to have type 1. Type 2 is by far the more common because obesity is by far the more common. Generally doesn't happen until you're older. Again, that's why we used to call type 1 juvenile, because kids had that and old people had this. However, now kids have this as well. Treatment is weight loss. When we saw people with type 2 diabetes at Sanger Clinic, the doctor's office where I used to work, the first thing that we told them was 6 months of lifestyle change. So try to exercise, work out, lose weight, eat better. That's your best bet. If you lose the weight, the diabetes will go away almost all the time. There are some rare people who that's not it, and it's not quite type 1 either, and we don't know what's going on. But generally, if you lose weight, type 2 diabetes goes away. But that's hard. Weight loss is hard. So for a lot of people, they can't do that, and we end up putting them on a pill, an oral medicine that helps them be more sensitive to insulin. If that doesn't work either, and generally this works if you're kind of just borderline or low level diabetes type 2, if you have real bad type 2 diabetes and this isn't working, the pill isn't working, then sometimes they have to have the insulin shots as well, which is why we can no longer call type 1 insulin dependent and type 2 is non-insulin dependent, because sometimes now it's so bad that these people need insulin shots as well. Here's the good news though. The symptoms, the polyuria, polyphagia, polydipsia, high blood sugar, doesn't matter what type you have, those are the same symptoms. And all your complications, doesn't matter what type you have, these are the complications. Now, I do want to say that you only have complications of diabetes when you don't control your blood sugar. So when you don't eat right, or you don't take the pill like you're supposed to, or you don't manage your insulin shots like you're supposed to, and so your blood sugar is ridiculously high, that's when you have these complications. All these complications are because of blood vessel damage. So all the sugar floating around, the way too much sugar floating around in your blood vessels, scrape up against the walls of the blood vessel and scratch them and cause damage. And then cholesterol and fat and nasty McDonald's sticks to those scrapes in the walls, and it builds up and causes clots that can cause stroke, heart attack, the black toe thing, the peripheral vascular disease where your toes and feet turn black and we have to cut it off. It can damage nerves. Diabetics are taught to look at the bottom of their feet every day because they can't feel the bottom of their feet. And so sometimes they'll step on things, they'll step on like nails or thumbtacks, and they will be in there for days before they realize and cause infection, and they can't heal, and then they have to get things amputated because of the nerve damage. Kidney damage, again, remember your kidneys try to get rid of all that sugar, and year after year, trying to pump all that sugar through that glomerulus, you'll go into kidney failure. And then vision loss, that diabetic retinopathy. So if you control your diabetes, it decreases your risk of a heart attack almost 70%, risk of a stroke more than 50%, risk of getting legs and feet cut off more than 50%, and risk of kidney failure almost 30%. Remember, high blood pressure and diabetes were the top 2 causes of kidney failure. So it is incredible what managing your diabetes will do for you. That's it, guys. That's the end of the endocrine system. If you have any questions, be sure to hit me up, email, Remind app, or my office hours. I miss you guys incredibly. Go do something that makes you happy. Close your eyes, go to your happy place. Listen to a relaxation tape. I don't know you. I don't know your life. I don't know what makes you happy. Do something that makes you happy, though. And I love y'all. I miss y'all.